Did you know that Goliath was the nightmare of armies? The giant that could put fear into any fighting soldier that ever existed, exists and will still exist, a monster of gigantic size encased in bronze armor. Incredibly, he was defeated by a boy who wasn't even old enough to be a soldier. But did you know that Goliath is practically the beginning of the problems between the Israelites and the Philistines, and that he was not the only giant that God's army had to face? So it is. There is a lot to absorb, but all of this is present in the Bible and ended up being buried because of an epic battle between Vivo. Before we start, I want to ask you to subscribe to my channel here. See that red subscribe button right below the video. Click on it and then a bell will appear. It is very important that you click on this bell and select the L option so that you receive all notifications for the next videos I upload. And today, we will understand more about the champion of the Philistines and his entire lineage, the feared Nephilim. Without a doubt, the best-known giant in history is Goliath, a giant known as champion of the Philistines. They fought with great armor. Their height, according to 1 Samuel 17:4, was 6 cubits and a stick, converting to the types of measurements we use today. This monster is almost 3 meters. And that, of course, with those down. Now, imagine them standing up, about to launch an attack against their opponents. Accompanying this imposing size were a helmet and scale armor, both made of bronze. His chest armor weighed 5,000 cycles, approximately 56.2 kg, on his legs, bronze greaves, and a bronze greaves, and a bronze greaves, and a bronze spear hung on his back. The shaft of his spear was like a screen pole, and his shield was the size of an adult man, even needing to be carried by another person, and all this to protect him from enemy arrows. Underneath all this robustness, there was still chainmail, one of the most efficient protections in the history of war, which was very different for the Philistines, as they kept warm using a large piece of clothing, similar to a coat, with rings of overlapping bronze, from shoulder to knee. A coat of mail is a little different from the conventional one, and from the middle of the Philistines' camp, Goliath shouted for all the Israelites to hear, "For you come out and line up for battle, am I not a Philistine, and are you not Saul's servants? Choose a man to overcome even me, if he can. Fight and kill me, we will be his subjects. But if I defeat and kill you, you will be our subjects and serve us." This was a well-known strategy in the West, known as representative combat, where the best warrior of one army faces the best warrior of the other. The one who emerges victorious leaves with his army victorious. However, hearing that 3-meter giant screaming, no one showed up for the duel, and Goliath insisted on this idea for 40 days, morning, noon, and night. He went to the Israelites and boasted about his size and strength, challenging them to the combat. And meanwhile, there in the Judean mountains near Bethlehem, a young man named David was tending his father's sheep. He was too young to serve, and the only thing he knew about the conflict with the Philistines was that his 3 older brothers were already in Israel's army. On the other hand, Jesse, the father, was very concerned about the well-being of his firstborn sons who went to war. However, as he was already very old, he could not cross the mountains alone. So he decided to call David. "David, I need you to do me a favor. Take this bag of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread to your brother's camp. Also take these 10 cheeses to the militia commander. Check on your brother's well-being and bring them to me. News about them." David got up very early the next morning, left the sheep he was responsible for to another known shepherd, and followed his father's instructions. He arrived at the trench as the army was preparing to fight and shouted into battle, wanting to fulfill his father's mission and see what was happening. David ran to the front lines to greet his brothers. While talking with his brothers, the Philistine champion broke out of his ranks and shouted for the 41st day, wanting representative combat. David was in disbelief at everything that was happening. That man, wrapped in bronze, screamed for a challenger and profaned the name of the Lord, while the warriors of Israel ran to their tents in fear. Jesse's youngest son was enraged by this. His heart burned like coals, and he then spoke to the men around him. "What will be done to the man who kills this Philistine and removes the shame from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine to defy the armies of the living God?" "Oh," the people replied, "so will it be done to the man who kills the prize. For whoever killed the enemy champion, it would be the hand of Saul's daughter, vast wealth and tax exemption for the rest of his life." What is surprising is that even with all this, no one was encouraged to face the great Goliath. Then David went to King Saul and said, "Let no one be discouraged because of this Philistine. His servant will go and fight against him." Saul then replied, "You cannot go out and fight this Philistine. You are only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth." The boy replied, "Your servant has been taking care of his father's sheep. When a lion or bear came and took a sheep from the flock, I went after him, attacked him, and rescued the sheep from his mouth. When he turned against me, I grabbed him through the fur and struck him and killed him. I grabbed him through the fur and struck him." Servant killed both lion and bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who saved me from the claws of the lion and the bear will save me from the hands of this Philistine. There, David was aligned with the purpose, and his heart was boiling for the Holy Spirit. Saul was impressed and said, "Go, and may the Lord be with you." He invested David with his own coat and armor from head to toe. David tied the sword over his tunic and tried to walk with it, but he wasn't used to it. He said, "I can't go with all this because I'm not used to it." Then he took off his armor, took a staff in his hand, and chose 5 smooth stones from the stream. He placed them in his bag and with his sling in hand headed towards what many believed to be his certain death. And there he was, in front of a being 3 meters tall, heavily armed, where even the shield needed someone to be carried. Goliath looked at his challenger and saw that he was just a healthy, handsome young man. He ended up scorning, "I'm a dog, so you come at me with sticks." The Philistine champion cursed David by his gods and said, "Come here, I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and to the wild beasts." But David, with inexplicable courage, replied, "You come against me with sword, spear, and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the hosts of Israel, whom you have defied. Today the Lord deliver it into my hands, and I will defeat you. I will cut off your head. This very day I will give the bodies of the army of the Philistines to the birds of the sky and to the wild animals. The whole earth will know that there is a God in Israel. All who are gathered together here, you will know that it is not by the sword or by the spear that the Lord saves. For the battle of the Lord, he will deliver all of you into our hands." So Goliath ran with his spear, but upon seeing that monster coming, David did not retreat. He also ran towards the enemy. He reached into his bag, picked up one of those rocks from the stream, put it in his sling, and threw the rock. She hit that giant square in the forehead and knocked him to his knees on the ground. Knowing he didn't have time to celebrate, David knew he had to finish as soon as possible, except he didn't have a sword at hand. With everything his rival had, he gave the last blow, cutting off his head and ending the fight at once, leaving everyone completely speechless, unable to believe that the champion had been defeated. The Philistines ran in despair, and the army of Israel pursued them through the entrance of Gath to the gates of Ekron. Their dead were scattered along the road from Sarah to Gath and Ekron. When the Israelite army returned, they plundered the enemy's camp. As for David, he took the giant's head to Jerusalem and placed the Philistine champion's weapons in his own tent as a trophy. This, in fact, is one of the most epic stories and a lesson in courage, faith and purpose, and a complete intervention from God that made overcoming the impossible. But what was this Goliath? Some scholars believe that the champion belonged to this race, and others say that he is a hostage, as Nephilim were destroyed in the Great Flood. Nephilim are mentioned about 20 times in the Bible. In Deuteronomy 3:11-13, it describes that Og, king of Bashan, was the only survivor of the hostages, and his bed was made of iron, with a common measurement of 4.1 meters long, and 1.80 meters long, and 1.80 meters wide. She is still in Rabbah of the Ammonites, of the land in which they took possession at that time, the territory extending from the Arnon to more than half of the mountains of Gilead, with its cities, came to the tribes of Reuben and the rest of Gilead, also from all Bashan, the kingdom of Og. Half of the tribe of Manasseh came. That whole region of Argob Bashan was known in the past as the land of hostages. Scholars believe that the Philistines descended from the Anakims, and Goliath's status is due to the fact that Gath is an ancient stronghold of the Anakims, and the Philistine champion has a family tree made up of Anakims, which implied a dominant genetic inheritance that caused acromegaly. Familial, or gigantism. Therefore, at the time, he was a colossal figure. Another verse that mentions giants in 2 Samuel 21:15-22 tells us that there was yet another battle between the Philistines and Israel. David and his soldiers went to fight the Philistines. David got very tired. A descendant of Rapha, he promised to kill David with the bronze tip of Bai, Nobi's spear, which weighed 3.6 kg, and he was still armed with a brand new sword. But Abishai, son of Zeruiah, came to David's aid and killed the Philistine. Then David's soldiers swore an oath, saying, "You will never go out to war with us again, lest this lamp of Israel go out." Then there was another family with the Philistines, Engob. On that occasion, Shapheth, one of Rapha's descendants, was killed by David. In another battle against the Philistines, there was a man of great stature who had 6 fingers on each hand and also 6 fingers on each foot, 24 fingers in all. He was also a descendant of Rapha and challenged Israel, but Jonathan, son of Shimei, David's brother, killed him. These 4 were descendants of Rapha in Gath and were killed by David and his soldiers. In 1 Chronicles 24:8, it tells us, "And after this there was a war with the Philistines in Gezer. Then Shibbekai the Hushathite killed Saph, who was of the descendants of Rapha. And there was another battle with the Philistines, and Elhanan the son of Jair killed Lamine, the brother of Goliath, the Gittite, whose spear had a shaft like a weaver's shaft. And there was another battle at Gath, and there was a man of great stature who had 6 fingers on each hand, and 6 fingers on each foot, 24 in all. And he also was a descendant of Rapha. And he reviled Israel. But Jonathan the son of Shimei, David's brother, killed him. These 4 were born to Rapha in Gath, and they fell by the hand of David and by the hand of his servants." It's impossible not to be impressed by the story of the battle of David and Goliath, and it's also almost impossible to walk away without learning anything from it. Keep in mind that no matter the size of your problem or the enemies that plague you, our Creator will protect you if you have faith. And if you feel like it, leave it in the comments. What is the giant that is plaguing you and that you must fight a battle that God will help you defeat? If you liked the video, click like and share this with anyone else who needs to know about these stories. A big hug, and until next time.